day, everybody. Welcome to class today. And today we are going to be talking about setting up your backend environment. I know we did set up our backend environment in the last class, but we are going to look at it more in detail this time again. Then we are going to look at CRUD operations, and with CRUD operations this time, we are going to look at how to set up CRUD operation with MongoDB. Then in the next class, we'll do it with Postgres also. Then we're also going to look at authentication, how to authenticate a user, register and log in, and then we are going to see how we can send emails. Then so those are the things we are actually going to look at in this class. Okay, right. But then before we look at those things, we should go over classes, right? And then see some intrinsic features about classes and object-oriented programming. So there were some things I didn't talk about in the class where we talked about, or in the lesson where we talked about classes. There are some things I didn't talk about, which I would want to talk about in this class before we move to or before we continue with the back end, right? Writing back end. Okay, so first and foremost, we already know that when you're setting, so I'm still here on this on the slide, right? So you know that before you start writing your backend, you have to first set up your backend environment, right? And there are two ways to do it. One is using Express generator for it to generate your backend for you. Another one is by writing everything from scratch, and then those are the two ways, right? And the more simpler way is by using Express Generator, which is going to just configure a project for you, give you a boilerplate code of things you want to do, right? Or things you want on your project, and then you can then continue from where it stops. Okay. Yeah. So let's look into that. Okay, then apart from that, we are going to also talk about CRUD operation. So I believe you guys know CRUD is an acronym for create, read, update, and delete. So basically, as a backend developer, that's the main thing you're going to be concerned with building. You build infrastructure that will allow people to write, to read, to and edit and delete from your service. Okay. So then we'll also talk about authentication and sending email. So let's go over to the other section. Okay. Let's go over to the to VS Code, and then we can start. So, right. So looking at this, let's look at it. Let me create another file. Let's say classes and objects.js, right? Classes and objects, and then let's see. So first, let's do this. Let's say class my bank, and then we'll say so let's see, we're talking about how to use private properties in our last class. We say something like hash balance here. We're talking about hash balance, like if you want to declare a balance here, and then outside, so outside you're not even supposed to use the hash symbol in the first place when you're when you're trying to access a property, right? You're not supposed to say maybe um v1 const v1 should be equals to new my bank, right? And then you now say v1 dot hash. Nope. Normally it's supposed to be balanced this way. balance balance. So let's see, node class and objects NodeJs. Okay, I didn't save this file. Let's see, okay, it gives undefined. Let's say in our constructor, I'd say this dot hash balance should be equals to 100. Let's see. So trying to access balance this way still gives you undefined here. Let's see if we add hash, what it's going to give us at the end of the day. It's still, in fact, so this is actually what I was looking for. I don't know why this didn't happen in the last class we had. So normally it's, if you add a hash here, it's supposed to tell you that balance it, if you put your cursor here, right? It says that you see property balance is not accessible outside the class my bank because it has a private identifier. You get, so this hash is the private identifier there. But then if you then remove the hash, which means you're trying to access it, maybe it's public, it's supposed to be public, you get, right? Yeah, it's still going to be undefined. Let's save and let's come back here, clear, and then it now is still undefined, except you remove the hash there and say this dot balance that way, then you execute it. That's when it can now read from initialize the balance, and then it can be accessed publicly. The same way you have private properties, you also have private methods. So you could say hash say hello that way, and this should also dot log hello. Okay, so outside this function you can't say dot hello, you can't write dot hello. If you try to do that, it will give you undefined. Oh, sorry, say hello. It will give you undefined. Let me activate autosave so that I don't try to save, and let me make this a bit bigger. So let me still leave it as at this size. So trying to do this won't work because say hello is a private method, and even if you put hash here, try to put hash there, you would have an issue. You would have, if you try to come and run this again, to tell you the private field must be declared in an enclosing class. Okay, private field hello must be declared in an enclosing class. So what is just simply trying to tell you is hello can be accessed by a method in this class, right? And you cannot call it outside. So if you want to call this method, for example, you can say something like maybe hello, then inside hello, for example, you can then call this dot say hello that way. So doing that, if you come here and you say hello, for example, and you run it, okay, so I didn't call the function, that's why it's just returning that property. So if you call it now, you see, it's showing hello, which is the result of calling. So there's a public function, right, that calls a private function that now executes the content of that private function, right? So you're hiding this function from the public, probably because you don't want people to call that function directly, right? So doing that, right, you've hidden some details which are not supposed to be public. You understand? That's where the concept of encapsulation comes in. Where you had the concept of encapsulation, being able to hide the implementation details of a particular um um code base or a particular feature from public access, right? So it's just like in contrast or in comparison, something like your DVD player, your DVD player just has buttons that you can press to play, press to pause, press to eject, but the internal workings of that particular um uh DVD player, right? You don't actually know, but you just have the ones that relate to you, right? And there are things you can actually do directly, from inside the DVD player, but because they expose what they want to you, right? They expose what they want for you to use, and then the rest they hide it. So they have encapsulated some of the things that they don't want you to have private access, like direct access to, and then expose the ones that they allow like public access for you to interact with. And those are the ones that come out in their interface. It's just like having endpoints, but you cannot call a function if you're writing like a REST API. You cannot call a function directly on the backend, but they just expose an API to you. So that they expose endpoints to you, and you call that interface. Or you call the endpoint. That endpoint might call a function that is calling another function that calls another function that you don't have direct access to. Okay, so that's okay. Someone is asking me, can I repeat the word again? So that concept, right, of hiding details or restricting direct access to details, maybe properties or methods in your code, is called encapsulation. So if people that didn't hear well, encapsulation. Okay, then we also have another concept, right, called polymorphism. So polymorphism is mainly a particular function or a particular method or function behaving in more. Okay, first, let me start from what polymorphism means. Poly means plenty, right? Mono means one, so poly means plenty. Then morph means form or change, right? So when you say something is polymorphic, it means it exists in many different forms, different forms which you can use or which you can have access to. Okay, so it's a concept in object-oriented programming, right? And it refers to the ability of different objects to respond to the same call or the same message, right, in different ways. So you can call you can call you can create a particular class, right? And then that class has properties that make it act differently, but it's still the same class. Do you get? Are you guys following me? Are you guys following me? Is there anybody that is confused at this point? Okay, so let me give okay, someone is saying I should recap. Okay, so we could say something. Okay, for example, let me give an example. We have different kinds of vehicles, right? I'm trying to explain polymorphism now. We have different kinds of vehicles, or we have different kinds of cars, right? We have Ferrari as a car, we have Toyota, we have Mercedes, right? Benz, we have those, right? Those are all instances of a car, right? So you can have something like a car class, and then you have a Mercedes-Benz class that has the features of a car. You know that every car has a certain feature. For example, every car has a color. Every car has those three things. But so every car has these three properties, right? But then there's also something unique to, let's say Toyota. Maybe the sound of their engine. The sound of a Toyota engine is quite different from the sound of a Ferrari engine. Maybe the make of their engine. Okay, some engines are V6, some are V4. You get? So how do you make it in such a way that, oh, all cars have the same feature that every car should have, but then some cars should have unique features? So this is how you could write something like that. So now that is going to lead you to want to um inherit from another class, or um yeah, get properties and methods from another class. So let me explain how that works. So if we have class, first we have a car class, right? And then this car class has a constructor. Let me add a constructor. And then this constructor has a size, color. It should have color. It should have maybe number of tires, because every number of tires. Of course, this one can even be a default property, right? What else can a car have? Sorry. I'm thinking, what else does a car have? Okay, a car has a steering. Every car has steering. So we could just say steering. So I could say number of tires should be equals to 4 by default. Steering should be 1 by default. So it's only color you're going to supply. So you say this dot color should be equals to color. This dot number of tires should be equals to number of tires. And this dot steering should be equals to steering, right? So once you do that, the next thing you'd want to do is you want to maybe declare a class that maybe this class could call, maybe you could do something like get car property, and then get car property will just return, get class property will just return the this dot color. Okay, we'll say we are returning color as this dot color. We are going to return number of tires, as this dot number of tires. Then we'll have steering, not this dot steering, this dot steering is equals to this dot steering. Then you can have, for example, you can now have a class like Toyota, class of Toyota extends car. So now, doing this, what you've said is every Toyota is going to have this property, right? But you're going to supply, remember that there is a color which you need to supply. The number of tires and the steering are like you've supplied the property. So if you don't supply the number of tires, it will be equals to 4 by default. If you don't apply, if you don't give the number of steerings, if you don't even want to write this thing this way, you can just remove it and just say number of tires should be 4, then steering should be 1 like this. But if in case you wanted to change it, maybe for another implementation, then you might not be able to change it. But doing it this way, the reason I wrote it this way is because I want it to be that I can change this property maybe in the future. If maybe the government wakes up and say every car should have 5 tires instead of 4, I can just easily change it. Okay, so if I do that, and then I want to call the constructor class. So we will now say constructor, then we'll say the color, right? Now, we want to remember that if we call this constructor, it is going to want to execute whatever I wrote here, but we want to give this property of color to the parent class. So the parent class is the car class, right? And this child class is extending the properties and methods of the parent class, which is the car class. Okay. So I will then say super dot super dot or sorry, or not super dots, super, and you then say color that way. Then the next thing you would want to do now is you can now declare properties that belong to Toyota that no other car has, that is unique to Toyota. Okay, so I'm thinking of what to, so should I say spoil after maybe let's say next maintenance date. Next maintenance date would be or what's I don't know. I'm not really good at cars. Maybe mileage. I think each car has a different mileage. Or okay, can drifts. Okay, so you might want to supply that here. So you might say this. Okay, after the super, you then say can drift should be equals to so you can supply color, maybe can drift. So it say can drift of the instance object instance of that class would be equals to, okay, sorry. This dot can drift should be equals to can drift, because I think there are cars that are not really built for drifting. You want to drift, you somersault automatically, right? So now let's see how we can also call maybe another function, maybe class. We call it Ferrari. Ferrari extends car. So which means Ferrari will also have his own color, maybe that particular color. Okay, well, so you will supply the color to, so you could say constructor here again, color and drift. Then down here you see super can drift. Oh, sorry, super then color, and then these dots can drift should be equals to can drift, right? So you can do this. You can say, okay, so maybe console, what am I saying? Const T. Let me say T should be equals to new Toyota, and then const F should be equals to new Ferrari. Okay. Then you could say console.log, you could say console.log T dot, do you notice that we now have number, okay, yeah, okay. We now have number of tires. We also have number of steerings, but look here, right? Okay, so someone is asking what is the difference between color and can drift. Now, color is supplied to the parent class, right? Color is like every car can every car, right, has a color, and when you're calling the super class, as far as you're extending a super class, you have to supply a color, right? This thing can actually be done without using the whole color whatever, right? I'm thinking of a way to, okay, so Ferrari and Toyota are children of the car class, are children classes of the car class, so it can't extend Ferrari. Okay, so okay, the can drift is a property of the Toyota class, while the color is a property of the car class. Now, someone just said something. If I read something like speed here, right? Or let's say as creating Toyota should have its own fixed speed, right? Which means if I'm adding a property like speed is not going to come from the parent class, rather it's going to come from the child class. Because if I did something like this, if I said this dot speed should be equals to 200, or let's say or maximum speed. If I say something like maximum speed should be equals to 200 kilometers per hour, right? Something like that. If I say the maximum speed should be 200 kilometers per hour, no matter the car that extends, or no matter the class that extends the car class, all of them. So now Toyota and Ferrari will have the same speed, maximum speed, which is 200 kilometers per hour, which is not supposed to be so, because cars are unique in terms of their speed. Of course, a Ferrari is faster than a Toyota, right? So the two of them can have the same speed. So you can't, so now this speed is not constant for all cars. Well, even colors is not even constant for all cars. I could say something like number of tires should be constant for all cars, something like that. Number of tires should be constant for all cars. I could even, so let me modify this again. I would say number of tires should be 4, and then number of steering should be 1. They should not be anything like maximum speed. Should just be, they should not be any color here, because cars have their own unique color, but every car has 4 steering, 4 tires and 1 steering, right? So this color now, right? I don't really need to, in fact, I don't even need to pass anything to the constructor, the parent constructor at this point. I don't really need to pass anything. Once it's called, it will just supply the number of tires and number of steerings automatically for us without me trying to. Okay, so but my point is that if you supply something to the parent class, right? If there are properties set in the parent class, every every class that extends the parent class must always have that property, or will always have that property, whether they like it or not, right? And then so you should be able to differentiate between properties that all children class should have, and properties that should be unique to children class. So properties that every class should have should come from the parent class. For example, number of tires and number of steering. Every car has 4 tires. I don't mean trucks, so I mean normal cars, right? SUVs. They have 4 tires, 1 steering. So whether it's a Toyota, whether it's a Ferrari, any car any car class, or any type of car that extends the car class, is always going to have these 2 properties, right? Always going to have these 2 properties. Then I can supply other things here, right? I could say, let me call. So here now, I'll just remove this super. I'll call it can drift, color, and max speed also, because those are unique. So I'll do this. So I'll say can drift. Um, okay, so I want to type these 2 at the same time. So I'll say this dot can drift is equals to can drift. This dot color is equals to color, and this dot max speed should be equals to max speed. So each car can have their unique property, their unique can drift. I could even say can drift should equals to false, or should always equals to true for Ferrari, right? Maybe I'd say can drift should always be true for Ferrari. So you don't have to even give that. Well, maybe for this, it's false, because you don't want to tumble in a Toyota. Okay, so let's see what we can do. So now if we say T dot can drift color get cat, or did I say get cat property? It's supposed to be get car property. So any of these function or any of these classes, when instantiated, can call the parent functions, like this get car property, for example, right? Any function that extends, any class that extends the parent class is going to. So if I say t dot get property, and I say f dot get the same property, and clear this and command. So you see, the Toyota and the Ferrari class has the same Okay, someone is asking, must we put that super? Yeah, well, so let's see, let's remove it and see if it is still going to give the same result. Because personally, I haven't even tried it that way. Okay, so what is it saying? We removed super and it's saying must call super construction in derived class before accessing this or returning derived function. So you can see that it's important to call super. So super is like saying almost like you have to call, since there's a if to say there was if there was no constructor here, there was no constructor and you did this. Let's try it this way. Okay, it's even still saying the same thing. This dot cannot drift is equals to 4. Must call super. So no how no, even if there is no constructor in the parent class, you must still have to call super here inside. It's by default, you must have to call super. So without calling the super function, right, it won't, the class you're extending won't work properly. Okay, so I hope I've answered your question, Abdulatif. So if we do that now, you see that both Ferrari and Toyota have the same properties for or the same, or they can access this get property method, the two of them. Okay. And the two of them have the same properties here. But what if we said something like T dot color and F dot color? So did I supply any color? Okay, so I didn't supply any color. Wow. Color and max speed. So I could say the Toyota should be blue. The max speed should be 200 kilometers per hour. This one should be black. This one should be 400 kilometers per hour. So if at the end of the day we come here and we say T dot color, we say the F dot color. We come here and clear our terminal and execute that code. You see that now the colors are different, right? The colors are unique to the make of the car because we supply those properties. But the super function, right? That super function, yeah, or the parent, I like calling it function, the parent class there, the properties from the parent class remain constant. Even if I spin up I write a different class for a car and then still extend it, or a different car make, and then I still extend car, right? All the properties of the car and methods of the car I can access from this Ferrari. Okay. I guess, except I do something like this, I make this private. I say hash get that property, and let's see. Let me clear this and try to run. So now in the parent function, right? I made this get car property a private or get car method. I made it a private method. And because I made it a private method, it's not accessible to the function I just extended it with. So I extended, I made Ferrari to extend car. Even as much as Ferrari extends car, right? When I instantiate Ferrari here, Ferrari can't get access to this get car property method because that get property method is now private. So, but if I now make it public, right, it can then access it. Does it make sense to you guys? Does it make sense? Are you following, or is it confusing? Is it still confusing to you guys? Okay. So you can't have access to it even if it is private. Okay. You can't even have access to it as far as it's private, right? So if you want to have access to it, then it has to be declared in the function as a normal public property or normal public method, right? It's not supposed to be private, except if you want to make it private, then it won't be accessible by other classes. It can, so this get, if I make this get property private, I can write another function that calls this get property. You understand? Maybe, so now, why would we even want to do such a thing? Okay, for example, maybe you want to check for a condition, and then you say, this condition has to be met before you can call this get property function, right? You get, you want it that, oh, before you call me, let's take for example, maybe we had, this was a bank class, and then we had a customers as classes that extend bank class. Maybe before they can withdraw, you want to check if they have that balance before they can withdraw. So which means you're not going to allow them to call the withdraw method directly. You want to write another, you want to write the withdraw method, but then you want to write another method that checks if they have the balance before you can now call the withdraw method. Okay, so that's like a scenario where you might want to use a private method and a public method to call the private method when maybe a condition is met or something happens. Does it make sense to you guys? Does it make sense to you guys? Okay, cool. Any questions? Is there any question? Okay, so there's actually no question. Um, so let's see, let's see. There's another property of classes which I want to explain. So apart from okay, how often are classes used in backend, sir? Okay, um, well, if you want to write your backend using classes, right? You can actually do that. You can do that. But then if you don't want to use it at all in your backend, this I'm showing you is actually important to know so that if you leave JavaScript and you want to write Java, you want to write C sharp. I know C sharp also does like normal functional programming, but people still use the class way to write C sharp. So any of them, right? If you decide to move to, or if there's a language that you want to move to that is strictly um class based and object oriented based, then you won't have an issue if you understand what I'm explaining here. Okay, so so let's continue. Um, so there's this concept of abstract classes. So, and if you're calling an abstract class, you don't really need to instantiate it. So, okay, so I think it's can't, so that's Um, where did I see that concept of abstract classes? So mainly this polymorphism also has something to do with abstract classes, where so the class you're extending your class from, right? For example, now this car is more like an abstract class because you're not instantiating the class directly. Do you get? You're not instantiating the class directly. Rather, you are instantiating a type of that or a make of that car, and then that make of that car is instantiating another class. Okay, so that's that's so once you're doing things like this, like extending a class, you've already started doing stuffs related to abstract classes, right? Because you're not really instantiating this car class directly, but rather you are instantiating Toyota, and then Toyota is also getting from its parent class, which could also be called its abstract class. Okay. I'm breaking. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So let's see. So is there any, okay, I'm not breaking. Okay, cool. So is there any question based on this, on what I've spoken about so far? Okay. Um, in the absence of questions, I would want us to come back to writing our back end, or let's try to explain what we did in the last. Okay, you asked. Okay, I didn't get what you were saying on abstraction. So when you're talking about abstraction, right? You're talking about it still has to do with hiding away details, but hiding away details in a different class, right? Not just having private properties, right? That's so having private properties talks mainly about encapsulation, where that property is still inside that class, but it can't be accessed directly. But when we're talking of abstraction, you're talking of in terms of this part, like abstraction and polymorphism have a lot of things to do in common, where you have a different class and then you're inheriting from that part. Instantiates the parent class and also um extracts feature from that parent class to use. Okay, so abstraction is just hiding details, but hiding details in another class. Okay, just doing it in a different class entirely, rather than hiding it in as methods or properties in the same class. Doing it in a different class, actually, you've abstracted details from. So that's the best way I can actually explain it, and you can see the example here also, right? Where I said this class extends another class, right? Toyota extends car class, Ferrari extends car class, right? So this already it has killed the two topics, which is abstraction, um your own class or from a child class that is extending that parent class. So the parent class can have something that the child class is inheriting from, right? So in that process, you've abstracted the properties from the parent class gives from the child class. So let's take for example, these files are like different. They are in different places. Maybe probably they are in different servers, but it's not practical to keep two different class files in two different servers to call each other. But I'm just giving you an example. So people that are accessing this class feel that they are interacting with this class alone, maybe the Toyota class, but they are not really aware that that Toyota class is inheriting classes from a different class entirely that doesn't have to do with its directing. Do you get? So that's the best way to explain them. That's the best, or that's the simplest way to explain it. Okay. Is there any question again? Is there any question? Okay, so in the absence of any question, I would strongly say we should come back here to talk about the backend bureaus on the other day, right? So let's come back here and let's see. So what did we do here the other day? So let's try to explain for people that didn't know what was going on. So first, right, we just created a small database, an in-memory database for ourselves, right? And what we just did here is CRUD operation basically. So this to do, this, we just have an array here, right? And remember that this array you created, if you crash your server and start it again, right? This array will be cleared, will become empty again, because whatever is inside the array is saved on whatever you have inside the array is saved on memory, right? So then we now started declaring our routes. We now say on, so first, what did we even do before we even came here? We imported Express. Remember that we installed Express. If you check here, we installed Express, right? Then the next thing here, we came and we imported Express. We called Express, right? Then we instantiated Express, which means more like calling a function in Express. Sometimes you can actually look into these things to see what is going on. Okay, you can see what is being exported. So E is being exported, and what was E? E is this function, this big function here that you're seeing. And this E that is being exported is what we are calling here as this express function, which is it here. Okay, so when we call express, the next thing we are doing is we now declare this middleware. And I remember I told you that middlewares use this keyword use, right? There's route level middleware and there's application level middleware. Now, this particular kind of middleware here is an application level middleware because every route that comes under it is affected by it, or it has an effect on every route that comes after it. So this is it. If I wanted this middleware to only affect maybe to-do route alone, I would want to do something like this. I would want to copy this express.json maybe and put it somewhere here, for example. So now, doing this, putting this express.json here is only going to affect request that comes into this piece of code here, right? It's only going to affect this. But since I want it to affect any route that comes that I declare, right? So I would rather want to put it here. So doing it this way is you saying you're declaring a route level middleware, right? While putting it here, writing it here, right, is declaring that you want it to be application level. So every route that works or is supposed to work on that application is going to have the effect of this express.json. And what did I say a route is? So a route is simply a piece of code that can be executed and can call its next route or its next function. You understand? So inside this JSON, inside this express.json somewhere, in fact, let us check there. Let's check this JSON, body parser.json. Let's look JSON parser.json. Okay, it's just taking me in circles. There should be a place where a next function is being called, right? Although I can't find that. But basically, this JSON function, there is a place, there's somewhere that after it finishes passing or processing any JSON input that comes as a payload to the back end, it then calls the next to tell it, okay, I finished. I should pass what I've processed to the next route or to the route that is concerned with that information or processing that information. So another thing to note is that you have a path here, right? A path. And then you also have a controller for this path. So this is a path, or you can call it a route, right? You can call that a route. You can call this whole code this is the controller for this particular route, okay? And you can also, instead of, so if you don't want to make use of a controller, you can make use of a middleware. Now, let me show you something. Let me write a middleware that is going to do something before you can maybe add, or let's say, let me write it here so that it can do something before it can then send you the number or the to do. Maybe I could do something like, so I want to write a middleware and handle like this. Now, request, response. Then I'll now say maybe console.log hello. Now, if I leave this route this way, once I call it, it will only log out hello, and it will not go to this next route. It will not like call this next route. Let me do it for you to see. npm so node app.js. Then also instead of using post, because now I don't want to document, I just want to test, right? And I don't want to modify whatever I've written on Postman already, but I just want to test this route. I don't necessarily need to go and spin up Postman again, right? If I want to spin up Postman again, like start Postman and then test the features again, I can actually do that. But then there's a way you can test your routes using using your VS Code. Now, first and foremost, if you want to test your code directly from the comfort of your VS Code instead of using Postman, right? Although you still use Postman when you want to document. But if it's just only testing you want to do, you can install an extension called where is it here? It's called REST Client. You install a package called REST Client. Now, REST Client is a package that allows you to make HTTP requests to a backend or to an API, right? So you can do that. So if you want, if after installing the REST client extension, maybe so if you want to install it, you come here and write REST. If you just write REST client, right, it should show you that, and there are other kinds of clients. There are Thunder client, generator, other types of clients, simple REST clients, but I use REST client actually. After installing it, the next thing you want to do on your anywhere you are or on your root folder is you want to create a file that ends with .http or .rest. So you can call it maybe test.rest or you can call it test.http. Anyone will actually work, right? So let me go with the HTTP. So once I do that, I can just say get. The first thing you write is the request method get. Then you're sending the get request to HTTP localhost 3000. Once you finish doing that, of course, now you see I just wrote this line of code and it is showing me send request. Once I click on send requests, you see it shows me hello. It shows me hello and it stops there. If you notice, after showing me hello, it doesn't try to continue to do anything. And I didn't even declare a response that this middleware or this controller should do. And this is a controller, right? Because it's not calling any next. It's not calling this next function to do anything, right? I can decide to maybe respond here, you know, so it's going to just stop here. It's not going to try and call this one. But how do I make it possible for it to, after implementing console.log hello, it now calls this next route? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now declare next. By the way, your controller, right? Or your controller will always accept anyone, your controller or your middleware, your route level middleware is going to always accept 3 arguments. REQ, which is the argument to represent the request method, right? That the clients or everything that has to do with the requests the client is sending to your server. This RES is used by the server to respond to the client, and this next is used to call the next function. So once there is a next like this, it means you're trying to declare a middleware. So this will now be regarded as a middleware because once you declare this next, the next thing is for you to call it. You now say next like that. So now what we've written down is once we query the get to / call this middleware. Once you call this middleware, hello, console.log hello will be executed. After that, next function will be called. And this next function will now pass the properties of request and response down to hello, down to this hello. And then you can then do down to this other handler, request handler, right? And then that request handler will now do what it's supposed to do. So if I now I've written a next method, what I want to do is crash my server and come back here and start it again. And server has started on port 3000. Let's come back here and try to test again. Send that request. So if you notice, it logs out hello and it passes the request to the next function because we called next. That is why it is now printing or is now returning a response that has to do with the number of to-dos we have. Does it make sense to you guys? Is there anybody that is confused at this point? Anybody? So if there's nobody that is confused, we can go on. Now, what I want to do in this class is simple. I want to be able to send email, right? Once you create a new to-do. I should be able to send an email telling you, oh, thank you for creating a new to-do on our platform. Your to-do is the best, and yada yada yada, all those things. So, but before we even go into that, right? I would want to I think we should already start using MongoDB, right? I think we should start using MongoDB already. Okay, so let's see how we can create something. Okay, first, before we even go to creating MongoDB, I remember I said that it's not really good for you to write all your classes, or sorry, all your projects in one file, like one file like this. Have all the thing. Now this is just a simple to do. It just has to do alone. What if you're building an app that has authentication, has place for orders, have place for products, maybe it's an e-commerce application. It has all those things. You want to write all of them in one file. No, that is not actually how it's supposed to be. So first, let's look at how we can split this code. Let's see how we can take it into different folders, right? And organize the code very well. So one of the things you want to do is you want to create so let me create a router file, router.js, and then I could create a controller. Okay, okay, okay. Abdulatif, I've heard you, I've seen what you've said, or I've heard what you've said. So now let me just go over what we did in the last class for the benefit of those people that weren't there. First, we installed or we initialized the project, right? A NodeJs project, and we initialized it by writing npm init, and we followed the prompt that was asked. The next thing we did was we now wrote npm install express. So npm install express now installed express as a package. That's why we now see that. So before we did npm install express, when we did npm init, right? It created a package.json for us. It created this package.json, but without the dependency here. Then when we now say npm install express, right? When we did npm install express, what now happened was express now got installed. Okay. So after when we installed express, the next thing we did was we created app.js, right? We created app.js, and then we started writing this code. So okay, so we created routes. So these are like routes. We are saying app.get. Remember that get is a HTTP method, right? That signifies that we want to get properties from the back end. Then this get just returns a list of these to-dos, which is this array. Then we now wrote a function, or we now wrote a route that has a request handler that creates to do. So post is used when you're creating a new record on the back end, or when you're trying to tell the back end that the payload you're sending should be created somewhere, maybe on a database or anything, right? Or it should be created. So this one creates it. So what we are getting from the front end is request body title. That's we are getting. Remember that when you're sending this request to backend, you're sending it as a payload. Express backend receives that payload in an object called the request body. That's why you have request.body dot the object that is inside that request body, which is the title and description. Okay. So then the next thing is we push the ID that we created, the title that the user supplied, the description, and is done for false by default into the array, right? Then the next thing you did is you can get a single to do by its ID. So remember that we created a random ID here, right? So once you say to do with its ID, right, it just returns that ID for you. Then the next thing is you say patch. Patch is like update. So I said when you're patching, you should be able to change is done from false to true or true to false. So that's why I'm accepting that the user should send is done property from front end to the back end. Then the next thing was the delete. So the delete, you're only sending the ID. Then we loop through the array to delete the particular field that we want to delete. Right? So the way I'm deleting it is I created a new array, and I'm saying as far as the ID I want to delete is not the ID of the to-do, push that to that particular to-do object into this array. So if the ID of the array, if the ID of the to-do that we are currently holding, right, the to-do at the position I is equals to the to-do you want to delete, then don't push it here. So now this updated to-do array will have a list of to-dos that doesn't contain the one we want to delete. Then what we now do here is we now reassign the to-do up there to be the updated one. That is the one that doesn't contain the one we want to delete. Then after that, we tell them, okay, the to-do is deleted successfully, and we return the to-do we deleted, which is this line of code. So we assign the to-do here and we return it. So Abdulatif, you're asking what's the difference between patch and put, and I explained it in the last class. So I said when you're patching, right, it means the data you're trying to the data you're sending to the back end already exists, but you want to change it. But if you're putting, that data doesn't exist, but you want to add it. So I gave an example. I said if maybe on a registration form we were asked for first name or full name, email, and password, right? And that will obviously be a post request, right? But then after logging in, you now go to your profile section, you now find out that there's a box to put in your phone number. That phone number is going to be you do a put request because the phone number did not exist on the backend before, but then you're adding it to the record, to your record. You understand? But then now that number is already existing, and let's say you want to change it again another day, that would be a patch request you're sending because it's that phone number, for example, already existed, but you're just changing it, you're just updating it. So that's the main difference. But now I also said it in the last class that put and patch can interchangeably be used. Actually, like you can just create a route that says, oh, if that property doesn't exist, add it. If it exists, replace it. Just one single endpoint. The reason some people might separate it, have put and patch, while some people just do it once, right? I've even seen situations where some people have just post, and that post can do post and put. So the post is going to check, does this particular property exist? If it exists, update it. If it doesn't exist, add it. Some people do that. They just write post alone, and that is it. That post can be used for put and post, actually, like for adding and updating. Okay. So, but which is not, to me, is not really good because What if there are properties you don't want a user to be able to update after they've added, right? So that's where you might want to say you should separate them, or you should implement something that will stop that. But there's an easier way to do it to separate it. So of course, when you're setting it, okay, for example, you register and then they maybe on a platform and they say set transaction pin that first time. Yes, that transaction pin can be a put request. But then if you're coming to change transaction pin, right? Then that changing of transaction pin could actually be written as a patch request on your back end. So maybe if you want to explicitly differentiate maybe the because in that example now, in this example, like this last example I just gave, when you're creating a pin, right? You're adding that pin newly, right? So it's not going to go and check if there is a former pin, and if the former pin matches with the former pin you're trying to give. It's not going to ask you for any former pin, it's just going to ask you for a new pin. But when you're doing patch, right, it will then ask you what was the former pin, then what is the new pin you want to do, so that it can compare it. So that's like a situation where you might want to have put and patch, so that you can separate what the user is doing. Maybe on the put request, you might be checking if there is already a transaction pin. You should not be able to come and create a new transaction pin. Rather, you should go and try to update. You understand? But on patch now, you have to have a transaction pin already, and the transaction pin have to match maybe the one you're supplying, because most times they'll ask you old transaction pin, new transaction pin. So if you're doing patch, so the old transaction pin should match before you can then update the new transaction pin and the rest. So that's how that works. Then we have the delete. Okay, so beautiful. I want to separate these things. So first, I'll move this route to another file, or another file. I'll move it to the routers file. So this is what I will do. Out from here, remove all this. Out from here, remove all this. I'll remove all that. I'll put them there. Then what else am I supposed to do? So I'll also export this. So I'll say module.export equals to do. Module.export equals to do. So now what I'm doing is this to do should not only be accessible inside this app.js file. I can call it from any other file. I can call this to do from any other file that I want to call it from. So moving this here is not all. There are some things I need to do. So I'll say const express should be equals to require. Then say express. Then the next thing you would do is you would say const app. You could call this router. I don't like using app most times. I like using router. Okay. So I'll just simply rename this. So that's if I want to rename in bulk, I could say Control F. So I'm finding the word app, and then I'm replacing app with router. Then I would come and click here to change all. So if you do that, close here, you see that all the occurrence of app has been changed to router. If you can see that router.patch, router.delete, because it's more descriptive. Then you say router should be equals to express express dot router. That way. So now you're telling what you're doing here is you're saying this is a router, right? This file, this router.js contains routers. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to export that router that you've written. Now, it's important to do this. Doing this splits your code. Do you understand? Doing this splits your code. In fact, instead of having a controller.js, you should have a folder, or you should have a controller folder, and then that controller folder can contain your controller file. But this way, but now instead of you naming it controller, you could name it to do controller. Right? You can have other controllers. You can have authentication controller. You can have a forget password controller. You can have more controllers as you want. You can even decide that each controller, maybe you can have post controller, maybe add to do controller, update to do controller, delete to do controller, each in its own unique file. It's totally up to you. Okay. So once I do that, once I've done this router here, I need to export it at the bottom, the very bottom. So I'll then come here and say module.export equals to router. Then next thing you would want to do is for this router, you want to come back to app.js and import it here. So you want to say const to do router should be equals to should do this forward slash, okay, dot slash router slash, okay, sorry, forward slash router, because it's a file, it's not a folder. So what we've done now is, remember that we exported router, so we need to import that router here. We need to import that router here. Then what we are going to do is declare a middleware that is going to use this router. So we say anything that comes into app.use, anything that comes into maybe forward slash to do should be going to the to do router. So you can keep declaring more and more router down here. Are you guys following? Is there anybody that is confused? Ask your question now. Ask your question. If you're confused, ask your question. Okay, so if you're not confused, let's continue. So you've exported your router and you've imported it in the parent file, right? Now, another thing I want to do is in this router, you shouldn't have the controller or the path and the controller written inside here, right? Especially if it's a big project, right? It shouldn't be that you have the two written like this. So you would want to move this controller into the controller file and then import the controller file to the router file. Some people even still break this. So some people even make this, people make this like a service in a controller that has a router, well, which is also a very good architecture. So let's do that. We'll come here to do controller. We would write, in fact, on this router, we'll just come here and we would cut this from here, paste it, come here, cut the next one. Or rather than even doing it that way, Okay, let's do it that way. Later on, I'll still spin up a new project and show you other ways you can split your code, which might make sense to you guys also very well. So you might want to do something like const get all to do equals to that. So you might say const add new to do equals to what you copied out is to add new to do. The next one is to view, maybe view single to do. So which is from here down to this point. You say view new to do. View new to do. The next one is I think if I split my code into two, I hope it won't confuse any of you guys. Let me split my screen into two. So I don't know if this is better for you guys this way, for you guys to see what I'm doing and follow, right? So we have new to view to do, we have updates to do. So I'll say updates const updates to do state, or yeah, updates to do status. That will be equals to that function, that controller, and then the next thing I want to do is delete. This is one way of splitting your code. This is not the default way. Some people will still have this controller inside there, but the controller will now call a function which can be referred to as a service, which I will show you guys later on by the grace of God. So I'll say const delete to do equals to that. So now I've splitted all this, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to export this code, right? So to export this code, this is what I want to do. I'll say do dot export equals to, put that bracket there. So what I'm doing is I press Control and space so that it is going to give me recommendations, right? It's going to recommend what it feels I want to do. I want to export adding of to do, getting of all to do, get zip updates to do status, delete to do. So I think there's one that is actually missing. So I think it's to get view new to do. So this will not be view new to do, but it will be view single to do. View single to do. So I'll come here, add new, get all, get single. So why am I not seeing it? Why am I not seeing? Let's come back here. Okay, it's not get single to do, rather it is view single to do. So view single to do, comma, update to do status, and then delete to do. Now what I have to come here to do now is come here and say const. Remember that it's an object. In fact, let me just name it as controller. Let me just name it controller. Controller should be equals to require and I'll say dot slash controller slash to do controller. Now, if anywhere here, if I just write controller dot, you see add to do delete, get all these, so I can say controller dot add to do controller dot this, controller dot that. Mainly, I don't like using it this way, right? Instead of writing it this way, I want to structure it, writing something like add to do this way, if I put comma and press Control and space, you see that I still have every other thing there. So instead of that, I could just write add new to do this way. But for the benefit of people that are not very, very conversant with JavaScript, let me not confuse you. You just name this to do controller. And then you say to do controller dot get all to do, which is to get all to do here. You don't need to call it. You don't need to call it. It's once that route is being queried, it will be called. Then you say to do controller dot add new to do controller dot view single to do. Then you have to do controller dot update to do status and to do controller to do controller dot delete all to do. So I've been able to export this and I've been able to import it here. Then it's still something that is going to break on this code. Now we say we are updating to do. We are looping through to do, but there's no to do in this code. There's no place. Remember that the to do is in the root. Remember that to do is here in the app.js. What we can do is we can export to do, but it's totally not necessary. It's not necessary for us to even have to do in this particular file because there's nothing we are actually using it to do here. Nothing. It's just there. So what we would then want to do is instead of exporting this to do, we'll rather move it to where it is useful. So I would come here before the controller. Okay, before the not here, sorry, not here. This here is just calling the functions. We want to move it to where the functions are exactly, which is this point here. So I'll just paste it there. Paste it there. So anytime we say to do here, we are referring to this. We want to add to do, we are pushing to do, we are referring to this. Or if you still decide that it should be in your app.json and you want to import it, still very fine and better. So now let's test what we've done so far. If there's going to be any bug for us to battle with. Someone asked the question in the other class. The person asked, why is it that we need to crash our server and start it again? And that's because Node doesn't watch or notice changes that happen on your server or on your code base. So, and also, if you don't want to always be executing your app.json, maybe instead of, so now you know that if you want to execute this code, you now write node then app.js to execute or to start up the server. But you can write a script to start up your server so that when you call that script to start it. So you see this place you have scripts. If you come here and write something like start, right? Here you can then write node app.js. Once you do that, here now you just need to write npm start. And it automatically starts the whole server for you. Now, what you just need to do is come back here, start querying your server. Okay, so what is it saying? 404. Now, this is another key thing I want to explain. Let's come back here. Let's come back to our app.js. Remember that now all the routes that has to do with to do has to start with /to do. Remember it though. Before you'd say, why is it that I'm trying to get the to do but it's not working? Remember that you've renamed the route here. So if you want to get all routes to be /to do, then / to do, then you don't need to add this /. If you want to add a new to do, it will be / to do / to do again. If you want to get a single to do, it will be / to do / single to do, and so on and so forth. You get? I hope you guys are following. So if we do that, we come back here, we just write / to do. We send that request. You see now, it's giving us a 200 and it's telling us we've done very well. We can add more. So if we want to add more, if you want to demarcate or differentiate requests, right? You can do it this way. Penina. So sorry about those red lines you guys are seeing. If you're seeing any red line, sorry about that. Okay, so we've tested that to do. So how do we make a post request with this REST client, right? You can say post to HTTP / localhost / 2000 / to do / to do. Remember, then the next thing we can do is we could say content type, which is we want to tell the backender this is the content we are sending to you. So it's have that brackets there. What are we expected to send? A title and a description. So this is how now what you're writing here should be JSON compatible, which means it should have quotes on anything that is a string, whether it's a key or an object. You know, in normal JavaScript, you want to write something like title should be equals to this. This isn't accepted in JSON. In JSON, the title will be in quotes, the value will be in quotes. For example, if I add comma here and I try to send this request, it's not going to be treated. I'll show you an example. So I say that, and I come here and say description. Description should be that. So I'd say title first task, then description. Description will be this is my first task. Right? Now, if I put comma here again in this last one and try to send it, you see it's telling on what it is trying to tell you is, you see this comma you put here. I remember I said that we are going to talk about error handling. Beautiful. Expected double quoted property name in JSON at position 73. That's the 4th line, column 1. So what they are trying to say is this particular one, the 4th. So because of this comma, they are expecting that there should be something like a double quote here and a double quote at this end. If you put another comma here, it will be expecting that they under again. So if you want to be saved from that issue, once your last property when you're sending your request should not have comma at the end, using REST clients and using dash stress at least. Unless even I think even Postman, if you try to send and you put comma again on your last property, it's going to still give you the same issue. So now look, if I just saw this syntax error and I'm like, this thing self done is just tiring me. Why is it that this thing is always crashing? If you come back after 10 years and you run that same code, it will still give you exactly the same error. So the best thing to do as a programmer is to be able to understand what this error, what that it's a syntax error rule for structuring object you want to send maybe to another server or to a service, right? It will tell you that there should be no comma here. You should not use single quotes. For example, I say my first tax like this. You should not use single quotes if you're using JSON. You should not use single quotes. It should always be double quotes, right? JSON has to start with curly brackets. You cannot start JSON with square brackets and say you're sending JSON. Or if it is an array you want to send to backend, you write the array, you write object, then a property of that object can contain an array. But you cannot send JSON starting with an array. It has to start with an object. That's why it is JSON. So if you send this now, you see that you do added successfully. This first task has been created. You can come back here and just click send request and you see your task. Remember that you need triple hash to differentiate or demarcate the request. If one hash miss, do you notice that send request is not there? If you only use one hash or you use two hash, that's missed. Unless you put three hash, you will not understand that, okay, this is another request too. Let me try a fourth hash. Okay, at least it has to be like three hash upwards. Okay. So someone is asking, what is line 6 doing? I think I mentioned that. So this line 6 is used to tell the backend that what we are sending is a JSON object that we are sending. What if we wanted to send text, right? If we wanted to send text, we might say, oh, where is it? Oh, we might want to send, where is it? If we are sending, plain text, maybe like we just want to send hello like this. We'll say content type, HTML or text.plain. Then we can then write our normal HTML, maybe hello people, something like this. We can just send it. We can write this, but it's always good to use JSON. I always use JSON. So application/JSON. If I was sending a file to backend, I would want to send that file as multipath.form data, right? Then this form data will contain the paths to that form or the paths to that file, you know. So if you're uploading like your profile picture that I used to upload, you upload your profile picture, you upload voice notes, all those things. The content type is mostly form multipath/form data, right? But if you're uploading maybe a form, right, you might want to send it as application/JSON. Remember that you see that you can also send JavaScript directly. You can applications/JavaScript is also accepted. So this tells the backend that the payload you're sending, right? The payload you're sending is of this content type, is of this type. Okay, so that's the reason why we have so we are using plain okay, we are using application/JSON and then we are sending JSON payload. And this space is important though. If I remove this space, okay, let me see. I like putting that space. Let me see. Let me just say second task. Let me see my second task. Let me see if it would actually go. Okay. So why didn't it go? It said header name must be valid HTTP token. Then is now pointing that bracket to you. See, hey, header name must be. So now what is happening is that the back end, right? Let's not even talk about the back end. This REST client is taking this number 7 to be part of the header method or the header property, right? And let me also go back to something I mentioned in the other class. Remember that I talked about the request method of post requests. I talked about the route that you're trying to send your data to. Then I mentioned something about request header, that your authorization, content type is in your request header. This is how you declare your request header in using REST client. This space is important. This space tells the REST clients that anything that comes after this space is the payload you're sending. It's not part of the header. If you don't keep this space and you join everything together like this, it will take this number 7 to be part of the header, and it is not a valid header. So if we now try this again, you see that it has added the second task. If we come back here and send request, you see my first task and my second task has been added. Beautiful. Okay, so then we've done those things, Let's see how we can send email, right? Let's see how we can send email. So before sending an email, let's see how we can make it possible that each time we make changes to our app, this beautiful to-do backend, anytime we make changes to it, it should update automatically. This is how to do it. You will install a package called NodeMon or NodeDemon because this is the spelling of demon at this end. Say NodeDemon, or some people call it's popularly known as NodeMon. So Node monitor. So it monitors your Node package, right? Or your NPM package. And once there is a change, it restarts your service automatically so that you don't need to do it manually. So NPM install NodeMon. Then let's see. NPM install NodeMon. While that is installing, so you finish installing, then the next thing you want to do after installing NodeMon is you want to go to your package.json and change this here, right? From node start to, okay, now this is what I like. This is another good thing. You might want to be able to run this using Node and also run it using NodeMon. You can declare another script tag. You can call it another script property called maybe dev, for example. And you say dev should be dev should be NodeMon app.js. So if I want to start it with the first one, I'll just say npm start. It starts it with this script. If I want to start it with the second script, I'll use Ctrl+C to crash the server. Yeah. Then I'll now write npm run dev. Now it has started it with NodeMon. See, it has started it watching the extensions that end with JS, MJS, CJS, JSON. Now let's come back here. Let me just delete this space. NodeMon has started. Let me add space. NodeMon has restarted. You see, anything I do, even if I come here, I decide to keep space here, NodeMon will restart. So automatically now, any change I make to my code is automatically taken by NodeMon. Okay, automatically taken by NodeMon. Right. So that's how to do it. And we can use this other one to install NodeMailer. So npm install NodeMailer. And I know someone is typing now. Please, what is NodeMailer? Calm down. NodeMailer is used to send emails via your backend. So you can use NodeMailer to send email. from your back end to other people's email, and we will see how we can actually do that. My mind is still telling me that someone is typing that question, Sha, but that is the usefulness of NodeMailer. It's mainly a package used to send email. So I will install NodeMailer and I would want to know once you install NodeMailer, right? You want to create a utility. Like so now there are some things that I feel you shouldn't write in your controller because those things are just providing a particular service. They are not really the main, they are just like something you should be able to call. You know, you might want to send emails multiple times in different places in your application, not just once. So you can have a place to write reusable functions, right? So you can do that by creating something like a maybe a service, or I like calling it utility folder. In that utility folder, you just create a new file. You can say send email.js. Okay. Then did I? Okay, not JS, not HS. I'm not using Axel. So send email.js. Then the next thing we would want to do is we would want to import NodeMailer. NodeMailer is equals to require NodeMailer. Okay. NodeMailer is equals to require NodeMailer. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to declare a transport, right? Oh, sorry. You want to declare or you want to instantiate a transport layer to what is going to be sending those emails. Okay. So how do you do that? You say const transport const transport is equals to, or you can call it transporter anyways, mailer, that's a mailer. NodeMailer dot create transport. So this create transport is more like where you initialize the properties for the server you want to be using to send that email. Okay, and then it accepts an object. It accepts an object, and then this object will take the service name. Okay, see it's service. Let's use Gmail for now. Gmail, the host. And that should be smtp.gmail.com. Then you have auth. Auth is going to contain the username, and I'll show you how you can get the username and the password. Then another thing we want to get is this going to be sent through a secure medium? So if it is secured, you say true. Then the ports. So most times these things you are seeing, they are, if you browse about, if you just write on your Google, you write Gmail SMTP config or Gmail SMTP configuration, you will see a detailed way. They will tell you the service is Gmail, the host is SMTP, this the port number you would use, right? So 465. there are different port numbers, right? So you need to know. I think 465 is the most popular port number used. There's whether 7 something something, I can't remember, but 465 is very popular. Now, one thing you'll be asking is, where do we get this port? Where do we get that username? Now, I'll take you to my Google account to show you how to get that. So how do I'm going to reshare my screen for you guys. I'll share my screen. Okay, let me reshare my screen now. So let's come over to my email, right? I'm just using this as an example. My email is open. I didn't want you to see the list of emails, so I just put this here, right? So anywhere, in any of your Google app, as far as it has this icon here, you can click to manage your account, right? You click on it, but I like using Gmail to get access to manage my account. Once I click on manage account, the next thing I'm going to see, okay. So the next thing I'm going to be presented with is this screen, right? Data privacy, whatever. The next thing I want to do is I want to first and foremost, before you need what is called an app password to access or to be able to send email via your Google. Now, before you can create an app password on your Google account, your Google account has to be two-factor authenticated. Like that two-factor authentication on your Google account has to be activated. If you don't activate that two-factor authentication on your Google account, you won't be able to create an app password, and you won't also be able to use that Google account to send information. Now, this is for Google accounts. What if you wanted to, let's take for example, you want to create a no reply email, maybe no reply at your companyname.com. That is going to be you buying an email plan. You can buy an email plan from Namecheap. Namecheap allows you to buy domain name and buy email plans for that domain name. So when you buy an email plan, you can just create your username and password there on Namecheap, and then you supply it to your node, right? But that is for paid premium stuff, right? But now we want to try to send emails for free, right? Because we don't want to spend money. So we'll say I'll just search here for app password. So see it here, security app password. I click on it and I wait for whatever is going to happen. It's asking me to enter my password. I believe that should be my password in Jesus' name. Jesus. Lord of Jesus. Thank you. So now it takes us to this place to create an app password. So first, read app password helps you sign into Google accounts or older applications and services that don't support modern security standard. Okay, I agree. So I already created an app password around January. So let's check what's this app. So I want to create another app password that we are going to use with our account. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say they are asking for the app name. I'll say CodeCamp 5.0 email test. Because don't worry, this particular, what we've written here is not going to be sent to anybody. It's not going to be shown anywhere. It's just a name you can use to differentiate what email. So once I delete, or because what I'm trying to create, if it goes, it will go public because this email, video will go on Google. So I'll need to come and delete this app password I've created so that someone randomly will not impersonate me to send emails. So I'll click create and it shows this password. If you go and click done on your own, first copy this password first and foremost before you click done to avoid stories that touch. So the next thing you want to do is you come here, you would come to the password section and paste that password without space. Remove that space that they gave you. It's not a relationship, you need space. Okay, then you now say the username or the email itself, ukokjunior@gmail.com, ukokjnr@gmail.com. So now what we've done now is we've set up this we set up what we need for our email. Okay, everything that we need. Now what we just need to do is we can actually use this transport to just send email, right? We can say, in fact, this is what I'll do. Export that transport to help me send email. Or no, not export. Module.export equals to transport. So this actually, so I've exported this node modules. The next thing I want to come and do is in this to-do controller, I'll come and import it because I want to send email once you create, or I want to send an email once you create a new email. So this is what I will do. I'll then say okay, so what would we then say? Where is it? Okay, we say costs transporter or whatever I want to call it equals to require ./util ./ So you remember we are in to-do controller, and if you say dot and // you're saying that current place. Okay, so Abdulatif, you're asking me why am I not using export const, right? Export const is used in ES modules, right? But here we are using CommonJS instead of ES modules. So that's the reason why I'm not using const export this way, right? Or export const and what, because we are not using any, we've not configured our project to use ES module. So you notice I'm not even using import here, like import this from that, right? I'm not using import because I've not configured this project for that, for using ES modules. We are using CommonJS. So that ES module way of importing is just more like syntactic sugar. It still compiles back down to this require that you're using here. Just that it's just like it's just more like what we just did with classes. That class we wrote class and then we wrote class name. That's still syntactic sugar. Like it's not as if that's how the compiler understands class. Those classes will still be broken down to prototype and then executed. So it's more like you're writing it with that syntax, but it is not executed as how that syntax is supposed to be. It's compiled back to prototype, because JavaScript is not really even a class-based language, a prototype-based language, function and prototype. But you writing prototype doesn't make it behave more like other languages that are object-oriented. So they brought about that syntactic sugar to make you easily write your classes like other languages, but it's still going to be broken down back to prototypes for you to use. So what I've said, if you don't understand it, You will understand it better by and by. Right, so I'll say /utility / send email. That's where transporter is coming from. Send email. Why is this saying CommonJS may be converted to that one concern them? So I want to say when I add a new to-do, after adding the to-do to the list of to-do, I want to do something like this. I'll say now, transport, in fact, let's write transporter first. Let's come and hover on it. Okay. Dot send email. Bam. Let's come and hover on this send email. Send email, sends an email, transports. Send email. What does it return? I'm looking for his return statement. Okay. Okay. Let's not worry, Sha. Let's continue. So we want to say we are sending from. The from is still going to be the same. Even if you don't write the same thing, the from is still going to be gmail.com, right? The to is who you're sending it to. Let's say maybe I made it possible for people to give a title, a description, and well, let me still use the to as me. So the to should still be me. So I'm sending an email from myself to myself. Then the subject is going to be new. I'll say to do, I could do something like this, create to do. Then the body of the message could be text or HTML. Anyone, if I want to just send a text as body, I could do that. If I want to send HTML, I like sending HTML because I want to be able to beautify the message I'm sending. So I'll say HTML, and I like using backticks at this point. Then I'll come and say, maybe I'll say H1, H1, H1 here. Say you've added a new to do. Then I'll say to do, where is it? So someone is asking those email templates, is this where they used to add it? Now, you can create a function that accepts maybe parameters, and then you can, I will do that later on. I know what you're talking about. So instead of writing this HTML here every time, I can create a file where I write the HTML in, and then I call the function from that file and do whatever I want to do. But that will be in another class. This is like showing you how to send a basic email. Dot title. And then you could say something like H1 or div. Say req.body.description. So the description there, right? Now let's start the server. Okay, waiting for changes before it starts. Okay. Okay, so let's test adding a new to do again, and then we'll check our email. So we'll say third task, and say this is my third task, right? then we send that email. So first, we see that we have a third task that is being added here, right? We have a third task. Let's go over to our email and see if we've received anything. Let's go over to our email. So I'll stop sharing, then I'll share my email. From here, I'll share my entire email, Sha. Okay, so if you look here, you see to do, create to do. If we click on it, you see to do, create to do. From myself, the reason you're seeing me is because me is the name I gave I think me is the name I gave my email. I can't remember, but there's a reason it's showing me. So it's saying, I think it's because it's from me to me. That's why it's showing me. That's from my email to my email. That's why it's showing me. So it shows you've added a new to do, then with the third task as a header, and then this is the description of that third task. This is my third task. Okay. So Abdulatif, from what I said, yes, that's where they used to add it, right? That's where they used to add it. But then you can also decide that you're going to add it somewhere. You can add it in a different function and call it, right? So based on what we've done so far, is there any question? Is there any concern? Is there anything you guys will want to ask? Is there any? Who has a question? So let's just go over what we did. Today we splitted the code, right? So we see that our entry point, which is app.js, is simpler to follow now. We just have to do and to do router here. Then coming down here, this to do router is coming from router here, which so I can even group my router and do it like this. Some people even rather want to do router.post, router.get, .post, .patch, .delete like that. Well, I don't like doing it that way, right? I could group my router and name it maybe to do router. Maybe if I have an authentication router, I could come here and do something like authentication router. Then I'll say maybe router.get maybe to / register, maybe / login. Then maybe you can have others too. Others that you group that way. So this way, someone can easily understand what is happening on your route. Say, oh, okay, this person is doing, these are the things this person is doing on this route. Okay, this is the ones to handle to do. Everything about to do is here. If we want to talk about authentication, it is here. Maybe we want to talk about something, it's somewhere else. So let me remove this. That's what is causing the error. So you can group your routers this way, right? And then you break them down. You see how we separated them. So everything that has to do with to-do controller is now in to-do controller. Maybe if we had, for example, the ones I wrote down, which is auth things that has to do with authentication. I can come to controller and create authentication controller.js, put my code in there, and link them. You understand? So that way you've successfully splitted your code properly so that people can use, and it will be easier to scale. It will be easier to read, understand, and use your code. So on that note, is there anything, any question anybody would want to ask at this point? Any question? So time is not on my side. This time has already gone, right? And I know I talked about using MongoDB and then doing authentication, but I can't squeeze that into this class. So that will come in the next class on Monday, on Tuesday, right? That's next week. So you guys can, okay, you're asking if we can push the code and share the sample backend. Okay, what I'm going to do is this code is going to be part of the tree of life. It's going to be part of the tree of life. So it's going to be one of the routes, sorry, one of the branch of the tree of life. So you'll be able to get this code from there. So that's what I'll do. I'll push it there. Okay. All right. So is there any other question? Is there anybody that the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video, right? In this class, the last thing I'm going to talk about. Never you push your password or your secret key directly to GitHub. Don't ever do this. Don't push it directly to GitHub. It's not advisable. Now, how do you hide those kind of things from GitHub? How do you hide them? Let's see how we can hide them. Okay. What happened here? Let's see how we can hide them. The first thing you want to install is npm.env. npm install.env. So now, a .env file is mostly a file that you use to keep your secrets, things that you don't want to be exposed because of how sensitive those things are, right? So I'll show you how to use it here. Now, you come to your entry point. You say require .env.config. This is you initializing env, the environment variable for your project. Because when you want to deploy, apart from the fact that you use env to hide those things, those secrets, like your passwords and your app, maybe your ID, right? When you are trying to deploy your project on a network or on a service, you will not put in your um your sensitive data directly on the project. You put it in a maybe a form that is designed to hold things that you can put in your .env file. And if you don't configure your project well to work with .env files, it might not work together. We'll see how that works actually when we deploy our project. When we deploy any of our projects, we'll see how it works. Now, after doing this, the next thing you want to do is you want to create a .env file. Never you push this file on GitHub. In fact, once you finish creating .env file, the next file you should create is git ignore. Git ignore, and that git ignore file you put .env. You're telling Git that anytime you're pushing from this project, never push .env because it is a taboo. Never push .env. So that your keys, if this project was hosted on a public repository, people shouldn't be able to access your key. They can access the code from the project, but anything that has to do with your key, they should not be able to access it. So now what do we do? We where is it? We come here, we remove, in fact, we remove the value of this password. We remove the value of that password. We come here, we say there is constants here, you assign it. So you just say email, password, anyhow you want to write it. I like writing it that way because it's constant. You copy it, you write email password that way, then you come back to this place and you write process.env dot the name that you used for your env. Now, it's when you push this code on GitHub, what people are going to see is process.env.password. But since you're not pushing your env file, they understand that there's a password property that's in that env file. So when they are creating their own, you understand? When people want to, maybe they clone your project and then they want to send emails to, they will supply the value of email password there. Some people also go as far as doing this. So apart from having .env, they have something like .env dot, is it dot example .env dot example, and they just say they just do something like this. So this is like this .env dot example can be pushed on GitHub. So anybody that is cloning your project will understand that, okay, the person can just simply supply his email password here and then rename the file back to .env. You get? So you can say email password, you can say email username equals to, then you now copy the username here, or you cut it, you paste it there, say email username, that, copy this, the key, you come back here, you now write process.env dot the username there. So once you do that, right? Once you do that, let's just crash our project and start it again. Once you do that, you can come back here and say, okay, let's try to add a fourth project and let's see. So and also there's no real need of trying to, I usually also ignore the .http this test, because sometimes I might have sensitive data inside here. For example, maybe if I'm testing how to register a user, I might put a username and a password here. Okay, so most times you might also want to say you want to ignore anything that has asterisk.http and asterisk.rest. So this is saying whatever the file name is, as far as it ends with the extension .http or .rest, don't push it to Git. Don't push it online to GitHub, right? So you can use .example. You can use .local, right? .local is mainly used. So some people have .env or .example.local. Then they configure their environment in such a way that if they are using their PC, it will use .local. If they are using if it's on production, it uses .env without the local. Some people configure it that way. So once you do that, what is the next thing you're going to do? You can now come back and test. So let's test here. So I say my fourth task is my fourth task. Then I send that request. So what is it saying now? So it's saying missing SMTP credentials. So what is it saying? This SMTP credentials has to do with the email. SMTP means simple mail transfer protocol, right? So, and that is because of this place. So process.env, so we'll need to call, we'll say require .env .config. Okay. Once we do that, we can come back here and say fifth, because that's the fourth one has actually been added. So if we come back here and say fifth task, we send. You see, this is my fifth task, right? Fifth task. And then let's come back to the email and see if they are going to send us a fifth task. Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. Beautiful. So you see that this was the fourth or the third task. Then you see that there's a new email here. You've added a fifth task. Let's click on it. You see, create to do. You've added a new to do. Fifth task. This is my fifth task. So you see, the .env is working. Okay, .env is working for our project. So that's the last thing I just wanted to show you guys because it's very important. I don't want to hear I created this key and I pushed it mistakenly to. In fact, if I give any task and you push a key with your task to GitHub, I'll use that to mark you down. I use that to reduce your mark. I'm saying it now. So in case someone comes and say, why is it that I'm scoring this particular mark or my code is working, I'll tell you this particular key, you pushed it on GitHub and you did not hide it. Why? You have to explain why you did not hide that key because it's important. Okay, so this is where I'm going to stop for today's class. Thank you very much for coming out. If you didn't get everything I said on the video, try and watch the video again. I promise you, you'll get everything I've said. You'll get everything. Watch it like if you don't get it the second time, watch it the third time. If you don't get it the third time, keep watching it till it sinks. And thank you very much for coming out. And that would be all for now. Bye-bye.